بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم ألهمنا مراشد أمورنا وأعذنا من شرور أنفسنا. In the chapter of Kitab al-Fitan, after the first fasal, perhaps it's the first narration of the second fasal, or a few after, the narration, the wording of the narration as quoted by Hazrat Huzaifa radiallahu an, will be something like this, that he says, I asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, هل بعد هذا الخير أو أيكون بعد هذا الخير شر كما كان قبله أيكون بعد هذا الخير, that we are living through such an era of goodness, but will it always remain like this, or will there be that shar, that evil like what we had seen before your coming? So the system of the world is you'll never ever be able to be like. When something goes on its height and its peak of excellence, then you must understand that be ready now for the zawal, for the fall also. And that's how you must be ready in life. Whenever something reaches its heights, then you mustn't have badzan. You must always have good hope in Allah, but you must always be ready. Nothing stays pure. There will always be the chance of weakness coming in, fitna coming in, problems coming in. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, meaning it is going to happen. So he asked, فَمَا الْعِصْمَةِ, that how will we save ourselves? Some narrations we saw that when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentioned a time will come that you just break your sword. But in this one he said, as-safe, that your protection will be the sword. Protection will be the sword. You have to understand how we mentioned many a time, these narrations were so unique, it covered like the entire history of the world. Each one referred to a different aspect. This was referring to those that have made shara on the narration, said the first shar that came was irtidad. Allah's Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away and so much the murtads went out. At that time, other Sahaba radiallahu anh said, hold back. This is not the time to just go in war. Let us try and speak to these people. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh lifted up the sword. And he said, I will fight against those, as safe. And it was because of the sword that Allah Tabarak Ta'ala brought everything back. But it was going to continue, and every time the sword was going to be the answer. The world would then see later on, the time will come where the crusades would break through the lands of Al-Aqsa, Sham. And at that time everyone thought this is the end. Where we ever thought the Christians will come back into Sham. And how they took over the whole. 4 Christian kingdoms were established. And when everyone said there's no way we're going to stand up against this, then that narration, as safe, your protection will be in the sword. When that sword was lifted, Allah Tabarak Ta'ala removed that entire fitan. And then the lands of Sham, as though it had to look for a Christian after that. Whereas in that 96 years, 92 years from the time that Aqsa was taken, they said there wasn't like a masjid where Allah's name was being taken. But when the sword was lifted, and Allah created that man Salahuddin al-Ayyubi and his masters, فَمَا الْعِصْمَةُ, what is our protection? He said the sword. And then when the barbarian Tatars and Mongolian raids started on the Muslim world, and again everyone thought there's no way we're going to stand up against this. At that time also, the najat that the people of the Muslims, many of the Muslims felt najat at the moment is only now with learning to live under the Mongolians and accepting them as our rulers. And they did it, many of them did it. Many tribes, they entered into there. total obedience, that we will be under you, the ghalaba of kufr over the people of Iman. But it is known that they only keep you under them how long they need you, and then they slaughter you. But Allah put it in the hearts of some people a safe, that وَمَا الْعِصْمَةُ, what will be our salvation? The sword. And they lifted up the sword. And when they lifted it up, then the world never saw the word Mongolian after that. Whereas at one time it was as though this has come to stay. فَمَا الْعِصْمَةُ was safe. So what a part of history it covered. Whenever there was that is not going to ever last. Now there will never be that mujahid who will stand. The narration said, as safe, the sword. So he understood that it means that there will be so much of war, so much of killing. There will be one shar, again fighting. So he asked a unique question. He said, هَلْ بَعْدَ السَّيْفِ بَقِيَّةٌ, that will anything be left after this? Like you're only fighting and killing, fighting, killing, fighting, killing. Who will be left? Will there be any good left, any bad left? You only kill. Nabi Sallallahu said it's not going to be like that. Meaning there will be phases. There will be phases of good also, there will be phases of evil. But every time the sword will have to come again to put things right. Everyone doesn't die when the sword is used. Some people think when jihad comes, no one is left alive. The world lived. Everyone doesn't die in jihad. And when jihad came to an end, everyone never lived. When jihad stopped, everyone never lived. When zalims came on the Muslim lands, that amount they killed, perhaps if the 15 years of war, that number wouldn't have gone. That amount that they killed. So if they said in jihad they were dying, jihad stopped. And they said now there is aman for the world. Now everyone will be in peace, and then it was only pieces after that. Only pieces. So he said, after this, will the sword leave anything? Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said it will leave. And again, what a word he used which described history. Whoever had looked into the whole history, then you will see it in this town and in that village and in that village, spreading from the one side of the world to the other side. He said, imaratun ala aqdha. There will be imarats. Imarats means leaderships, rules. Whoever understands Muslim tariq will know after the Umayyad Khilafat, from the time the Abbasis were established, then the Ummah never ever remained after that under one Khalif. Immediately the Spanish or Spain established its own hukumat. They were the breakaway. And when theirs was doing something, then others also slowly started breaking. Some broke away full from the Khilafat. Others remained under the Khalif, but besides making salam to him and taking his name in the khutbah, they had nothing at all to do with him. He himself was too weak to interfere with them, and they were too strong to bother about him. So there was now imaras. But in each imarat, it was a good thing because you would have Muslims, you would have salah, you would have the qadi. And at the same time, it would be a bad thing because each imarat is fighting with the other imarat. So forget worrying about who will fight against the non-Muslims. The Muslims had their own worries. That every day you got a fear that the other imarat will come and take over you. Unique it was, like Islamic tariq. More than they worried about the Christians and the Jews and what we call today the enemy of Islam. They were so strong at that time that the Christian threat was no threat. But the threat was the Muslim threat. That every Muslim group was strong. Imaratun. You will have your imarats ala aqdha. Qadha refers to normally, like you will sometimes see in the air, you'll see like that particle of dust. It's just moving. And when you see it also, you see it got like nothing, but it's there. Imaratun ala aqdha is that same. It will be imarats, but it will be nothing, but it will be there. Meaning you must know it's there and come back 5 years later or 5 days later and it's gone. Because the other one just took over. Now you come and say, where is he? He says he's dead. There's his head there hanging. So fast. One Amir will come. Sometimes his own mother will have him poisoned. Sometimes his own sister. Sometimes one brother will be jumping on the other brother. There was that time when if you are the faqih, you are the lucky one. Because the faqih would say, I stay out of politics. They'll ask me the fatwa, I'll say, this is the fatwa, I'll get my hadiyah. Then I'll come back 5 days later, the one, he's killed already. And the other one will ask me, what's the fatwa? I say, this, I get my hadiyah again. I don't fight with no one. Not your mufti, not your mufti. I live in the mountains and I give fatwa to all. Imaratun ala aqda. That was a very hard time in Islamic Tariq. Because whichever tent you had no hope my tent is going to last till next week. Every day there was a fear, and not of the enemy, but there was the fear of the other Muslim tent taking over. وَهُدْنَةٌ عَلَى دَخَنٍ. And there would be those times when Sulah would take place. Meaning 2 Muslim tribes will say that, you know what, the Mongolians are coming. The Christians are coming. How long are we going to fight? Let's join. But Hudnatun, even when Sulah would take place, ala dakhan, it would be based on smoke. They explain the word smoke to mean based on nifaq and khida, deception. That I'll only make this truce just for 5 days. I just need that problem to be out and then I'll kill him. Hudnatun ala dakhan. This wasn't speaking about truce with the Christians, because Christians forever deceive. It was called that when the Muslims themselves will be the biggest deceivers. That when their work needs to get a sulah, immediately they send a letter. That I'm ready, let's become brothers, the ummah needs unity. But even that call for unity will be based on deception. Ala khida'in, get my work done, and I'll be the first to stab you in the back. That was unique Islamic tariq. Islam went through all that also. How many lived, how many died through that. Hudnatun ala dakhan, imaratun ala aqda. The Muslim world saw it, and so many eras, so many places, so many villages. But it carried on. Then Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, or then Huzaifa radiallahu anhu asked this question, that what is this hudna ala dakhan? How do you have a sulah based on smoke? A truce based on like smoke. Smoke means nothing. You normally have a truce, you say, write it on stone. Solid. This is a truce based on that smoke. That's why nifaq, deception. He said, how do you have a thing like that? He said, لا ترجعوا قلوب أقوام لا ترجعوا قلوب أقوام كما كانت عليه. This word, the sentence is, لا ترجعوا قلوب أقوام. The hearts of the nations will never ever come back to what they were once upon a time on. Referring most likely to one other narration, when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke about before Quran came, he said before Quran Allah put amanat in the hearts of people. They were trustworthy. It settled into the depths of their heart. He said, and then slowly it started being taken out. This narration, لا ترجعوا قلوب أقوام كما كانت عليه. How once upon a time they were so truthful. They could not lie against the non-Muslim. Where would they lie against the Muslim? He said that hearts will never ever come back to that condition. The hearts will be the hearts of a deceiver. You can have the look of the biggest believer, but the heart will be the deceiver. That amanat went out. Even when they make a truce, it will be based on deception. Imaratun ala aqda wa hudnatun ala dakhan. And then he said, ثُمَّ تَنْشَأُ دُعَاتُ الضَّلَالِ. And then the callers of misguidance will be all over. ثُمَّ تَنْشَأُ دُعَاتُ الضَّلَالِ. As we explained, you can never pinpoint when these things happen. It happened everywhere. But one of the biggest times when this happened was just before the Muslim Khilafat was completely toppled. After which the world never see a Khalifa. And the next wording makes an indication towards it. Before the final Khalif, meaning the Ottoman Empire, was brought to an end, those du'at, those callers of batil were all over. They were the ones calling that bring an end to this Khilafat. They were the ones calling for reform. They never call it immediately after the Khilafat was toppled. They called it from 100 years before the toppling. That is why the Khilafat was just going down. They had told the believers, the Muslims of the world, this Khilafat is the biggest problem. They were the ones who said to the world that as long as the Western way is not our way, as long as their science is not our science. While the Khilafat was still on in the lands of Turkey, one of these so-called reformers came. He made the Khalif understand that as long as we don't take the model which I have seen now in Germany, most likely he had gone. If we don't take that model, there's no way we are going to remain with the rest of the world in this move. So to take the model, he asked, what has to be done? So he said, the first thing is all their books has to be translated. All their books. They write, he was given the license of printing, and part of the license was that not one religious book will be allowed to be printed during this era. Not one religious book. This will only be used for the printing of what we call today the shaitani sciences. It was printed so much and spread in the entire lands that he said before the Khilafat fell, the minds of the people were already atheists. So even later on when they fought finally for the independence of Turkey, they were not really going to be worried whether Islam was going to be sacrificed. Because their minds were already atheists. Those books created a scientist's mind, a questioning mind. They could not look at the ulama with respect. They would look at them that you are not so clever. You haven't read these books of science and geography. Then what are you talking about things that make no sense? This is how it's supposed to be. When that printing license was given, you can understand one caller to falsehood, he could create such havoc. One caller. Du'atul dalal, there wasn't only one caller. There was so many of them. تنشأ دعاة الضلال فإن كان لله في الأرض خليفة. If at that moment on the earth there is a Khalifa of Allah. Look at this wording. جلد ظهرك وأخذ مالك. Even if he's hitting you and he's taking your wealth. What a narration it was. Perhaps at that time, if there was those ulama to loudly say it, but no one was going to hear. Said at that time, if there's a Khalifa who's lashing you, meaning jalad al-zahrak means he's oppressing you for no reason. وَأَخَذَ مَالَكَ, he's taking your wealth. Because at that time now the call was being made. They said this is the dying donkey of Europe. The Khilafat was called the dying donkey of Europe. Donkey means he just doesn't want to die. Donkey, like stubborn, but it's dying, it's not going to ever stand. Dying donkey of Europe. There were Muslims at that time who were calling that for the salvation of Islam, bring an end to the Khilafat. For the salvation of Islam. Everyone had a thought that how nice it will be. I'll run it like this, and I'll do this, and I'll do that. Big thoughts. That this narration, at that time, if there's a Khalifa for Allah, even if he's lashing you and taking your wealth, فَأَطِعْهُ, just continue listening to him. But the world never, and the Khilafat fell. And with the Khilafat falling, the few who gave support, or the many who gave support, we'll never know. Some have written it was a few Arabs who gave support. Majority did not. Others have written the other way. We were not in that era. We don't know what happened, but Taqdeer had written it. Some of them had good intentions. They thought with the Ottomans collapsing, we will set up something even bigger. But a Muslim must learn that if the one helping you is the devil himself, then he is not going to let something better come up. If the one helping you is the devil himself, and in history there were too many times when Pakistan was being formed, all the ulama had the dream, if we can get this Pakistan, Muslim country, we can do what and what with it. We can become the next model of Islam. At that time, but they should have just, if they looked at, but who's with us in this thing? They would have seen that that modernist group who normally don't like the ulama. Suddenly they were, Hazrat, come, give bayan. Normally you don't ever call me for a bayan. You never in the bayan. So when Pakistan was formed, there and there they saw they were deceived. They were given the flag, a town was named after them, and when they went for the first meeting, they were told, this is politics. That you open your madrasa, and when I need a fatwa, I'll ask you, let us run the country. These are about 50, 60 years of deception. So those that were against it, one reason was that they also wanted Pakistan to be formed. But they saw in the lines of the sincere were a lot of insincere. The insincere will never let the sincere do what they want. Whenever you see the modern mind, he's moving with the ulama, like, I'm yours, I'm yours. And you must tell the alim, watch out, this one bites very bad. He's never ever yours. When he's walking with you, it means he just wants you. Not that he's loving you. And as soon as you'll do little bit for him, and then you'll become a threat, he'll be the first one who'll bite you. So Pakistan saw it. So many tanzeems in the world saw it. At that time, when the Arabs, they were told by the British at that time. The British told them to establish a strong, solid system. You don't need bid'at. The British spoke of bid'at. Where you ever think the British will know bid'at? The British, had they been able to see at that time, the British were already signing their own agreement. That the lands of Sham will go here, France will take so much, Italy will take so much, we will take so much. And on the other side, with the Muslims, they're signing, you will be the boss. When you see the enemy walking with you, then understand he only bites, but he bites very hard. The Khilafat fell, and that group who looked up and thought we'll do something, immediately they were made quiet. And after that, what the world saw is what we're still seeing today. We never saw much of it, because there were certain countries which had such a population, and that whole population went zero. Bosnia was one that was made known to the world. Otherwise, after the Khilafat, there were things that happened in the world that only Tariq perhaps could record it in that silent mode. تَنْشَأُ دُعَاةُ الضَّلَالِ. If at that time for Allah there's a Khalifa, then obey him. وَإِلَّا. And if there's no Khalifa, which was going to say, you let the Khalifa go, then who must you follow? He said, فَمُتْ. And he said, oh Hudhayfa radiallahu anh, then you rather just die. وَأَنْتَ عَادٌ عَلَى جِذْلِ الشَّجَرِ. Jidh here refers to like the root of the tree. He said, while biting onto the root of the tree, you'd rather just die. One meaning is when you say a person biting at the root, it means like you're so upset, but you can't do anything about it. So you just go to something and you bite on it. Otherwise you're going to bite your tongue. He said, you will just die now sad. Or another meaning is just stay away from the people. And when they'll come and grab you and try and pull you back towards them, you biting onto the tree in the jungle. Say, I'm not coming at the moment. Because one narration comes, don't follow anyone at that moment. And history saw that as soon as the Khilafat fell, there were so many tanzeems that were established. So many Jamaat stood up. But after 50 years, we realized all of them were liars. All of them. And whoever gave full support of them realized that I gave my support to the hypocrite. The good people were being killed one after the other. The one who had strength, they were the ones who were the biggest liars. Mustafa Kamal was one example. He came with such power, such zor, such fame. So much of fame he came with that recently the Imam, one Imam of Turkey, what a courageous bayan he decided to give in the Haga Sufia when it has been made now a masjid. So in his bayan he just said something about Mustafa Kamal. And he said the truth. And he said it in front of the President of Turkey. And the President also knows it, but they made such a issue of it. He said the truth. To say the truth even now when the whole coup was broken and Islam is spreading like anything in Turkey, even now to take the name Mustafa Kamal in a bad manner, it made that whole country go wild. The newspapers came and reporters, and in the parliament it was mentioned. How dare he says what he says. It will take another 10, 15 years perhaps when the people will finally agree, maybe he caught us. Because when you read what he did, you won't say you caught you, you say he raped you. He broke everything, yet you are fighting to say, how dare you take his name bad. Say, don't follow anyone at that time. Those leaders that came up at that time, how they took the world into the fire. People had so much of trust in them. Each one of them. They stood up as a warrior. They got the following of so many. And they just said, sorry, I can't help you. And then comes the next part of the narration. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, ثُمَّ يَخْرُجُ الدَّجَّالِ. And now be ready. مَعَهُ نَارٌ وَنَهْرٌ. He will have his fire and he will have his river. They explain that it will either be takhayyulan, through magic, that it will seem like a fire, it will seem like a river, but it will be nothing. And others say, no, actually it will be really a fire, it will be really a river. Or an easier way to explain it is, there will be so many errors. There will be errors where perhaps it will have a metaphor meaning. And there will be errors when it will have its full haqiqi, real meaning. There will be a time where fire and river could either mean, fire means difficulty and river will mean like ease. And there will be the time when fire will really mean fire. And rivers will mean the waters. He will have the waters and he will have the fire. They explain it, فَمَنْ خَالَفَهُ, because the wording comes, فَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي نَارِهِ, the one who falls in his fire. They say, أي خَالَفَهُ حَتَّى يُلْقِيَهُ فِي نَارِهِ. He stands up in opposition and he says, I will not obey you. And it becomes so hard that he throws him into his fire. Again, phases. One will be the phase where him directly will not have to be throwing the person in. There will be fire, and what a word fire was used. Whoever thought in the past war will come with fire? Where it was known at the past that you'll have war with bows and arrows. And if there was fire, it was little fire. But then a time came where the war became fire. Only fire. Only fire. And as it goes further, it will become even more. Because it comes that one man who will oppose Dajjal face to face, when he will be unable to slaughter him, finally he will say, throw him into the fire. So it will have his fires. Perhaps we're seeing one fire at the moment in the world, and there will be many, many in the phases. Sometimes you will see the fire without the individual. Then we will see an individual with the fire. And that individual will take his stages also. Different names he will move with. The world will call him different things. But he will have his fire. I wanted to explain this word that comes after that. فَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي نَارِهِ. So they say, أي خَالَفَهُ. The one who opposes him, and he understands I might have to burn. حَتَّى يُلْقِيَهُ فِي نَارِهِ. Nar can have one metaphor meaning, that he puts him in great difficulty, you'll burn. That meaning is also there. And the other is real fire. Where the individual understands, my whole family was burnt the other day. And he say, it can happen to you also. Are you ready for the war? It's not easy that. And that wording that comes after that, but it says, the one who falls in his fire, وَجَبَ أَجْرُهُ وَحُتَّ وِزْرُهُ. وَجَبَ أَجْرُهُ. They explain أَجْرُهُ means أَجْرُهُ السَّابِقُ. That whatever he had done good before this, now that he falls in that fire, and he says, I am ready to die for my Allah. وَجَبَ أَجْرُهُ. Whatever good he had done up till now, it becomes sealed. And now he goes with all his good. It becomes sealed. وَحُتَّ وِزْرُهُ. Whatever evil he had done before this, they say wizruhu means as-sabiq. That before this time, whatever wrong that he had done, whatever burden he had on his shoulders, and there's a lot of burdens. And sometimes when we see those countries where the shayateen launch their wars. And sometimes someone says, but they're not so pious. They're not so pious. But you think of this wording, وَحُتَّ وِزْرُهُ, that the one who falls in the fire, whatever burden they had on their shoulders, everything is wiped out. وَحُتَّ وِزْرُهُ, that's like a top. But then comes the scary one. فَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي نَحْرِهِ, as for the one who will want to fall in his river, metaphor meaning in his enjoyments, because water means ease, water means pleasure, and then a real meaning when he will be in control of the waters. And if you want water, not for yourself only, for your animals, for your entire establishment, everything moves with water. So if you want it, are you ready to obey? فَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي نَحْرِهِ. It's very easy to read the narration. But me and you know, just when Eskom says we're putting off the lights, everyone goes quiet. Everyone goes quiet. Imagine if they say we're putting off the water. That is why when we see those martyrs, and if someone says they're not so pious, then for me it's like, وَجَبَ أَجْرُهُ وَحُتَّ وِزْرُهُ. You can say what you want, but their ajr is wajib. And whatever they bore on their shoulders, everything is wiped. The worry is for me, because those are people who don't have water. So if the devil says, I'm going to hold back your water, in Gaza they'll say, Shaitan, we never had water. What water are you going to hold back? We never had it for the last 50 years. So I'll hold back electricity, say we never had electricity. If you hear how they live, they put up a building saying we know it's going to collapse in another 5 years again. They'll come and bomb it again, say I'll put it up again, bomb it again, put it up again. But the ones who had water, and that's me and you. وَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي نَهَرِهِ. Make a lot of dua while you don't see this fitna. Because we don't know when we see it, will we be able to say, no, I'll go for the fire. I don't want the water. وَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي نَهَرِهِ, who will fall in his river. That's the scary part. This one. It says, حُتَّ أَجْرُهُ. حُتَّ أَجْرُهُ means أَجْرُهُ السَّابِقُ. Up till that point, whatever good had been done, everything will be wiped out. وَوَجَبَ وِزْرُهُ. And whatever he had on his shoulder will become sealed. That you died with sin and no good. حُتَّ أَجْرُهُ وَوَجَبَ وِزْرُهُ. Then you'll understand why you make so much of dua, that Allah protect me min fitnati dajjal. Because that fall in that fire is not, in that river, is just not one river. But it's a cancellation of whatever you had done. And the one who goes in the fire, which is not easy, especially for the people of luxury. For the people of difficulty, they'll say we whole life in it. We lived in it, we die in it. For the people of luxury to say, I had enough luxury, now let me go in difficulty. No one says it. We saw those rich people who because of corona they had a collapse. You see them just finished. You try and explain to them the last 30 years you lived like the best of lives. Now you only got 5 years left. They can't. They can't survive 5 days without that living lifestyle. You ask him, is there no bread in the house? He said, no, obviously there's bread in the house. But that amount that I was getting, no longer will I be getting. I had to drop. We don't know whether we'll be able to drop also. Those who never had it will say, we never had it. We only saw the fire. So we're always in the fire. Those that had water, those that had electricity, those that had ease, those that had comfort. And then he's told, let me pull. فَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي نَهَرِهِ وَجَبَ وِزْرُهُ وَحُتَّ أَجْرُهُ. May Allah Tabarak Ta'ala save us all. We all think that we are the very pious and we have done so much. I have written so many kitabs and I have given so many bayans. But think of this narration. When that confrontation comes, it can either be all your evil is wiped away and your good is sealed. It could be the opposite. May Allah Tabarak Ta'ala make it the best for all of us, save us from all fitan. May Allah save us all from failure. Wa akhiru da'wana.